Yeah, originally I'm not from sports management. Originally I grew up in fast-moving consumer goods. I have been working for Procter & Gamble for 15 years. Then I joined essentially the Japanese version of Procter & Gamble, which is called Kao. And I worked there in several leading management functions, also as the CEO of a globally operating haircare company called Goldwell. But I always had a very strong interest in sports management, and with the growing importance of sports also in business, I articulated that interest also to a couple of consultants, and one day I got a call with the offer to become the CEO of Ironman here in Europe, Middle East and Africa. And since then I'm combining my personal interest in sport with my professional background, which is a fantastic combination. I do oversee the operational and commercial management of all our races here in Europe, Middle East and Africa. That means that I'm responsible for, right now, more or less 50 races out of the 150 to 200 races that we have worldwide. It means that first and foremost, I have to look for new races. Where can we place new races to address the increasing demand of athletes? But then also to make sure that we operate them successfully with a perfect operational excellence, and then commercialize them in a profitable way. Yeah, you're referring particularly to cultures. Cultures always have several facets and several aspects. I mean, there's on one side the so-called soft or qualitative aspects. That's not so much an issue for us, because we always try to address the needs of the athletes, and the needs of the athletes are very similar across my areas of responsibilities. The differences do exist in the areas of legal background, authorities, bureaucratic aspects, but also in the business environment. We are dealing with different sponsorship partners in France, Germany, or others, except the globally operating sponsors. That needs to be addressed, and we also need to address the fact that the demands and the requirements from the authorities with regard to the operation of a race are very different in a very strictly organized country like Germany, for example, or countries which do work a little bit more pragmatically, particularly when you go to the south, to South Africa or to Turkey right now. Those differences need to be addressed. We do that with local teams, but always based on a European concept, which we develop here in our headquarters in Frankfurt. There are several aspects which make sport, by the way, so valuable for life. Of course, there's always the health aspect, but there's always a kind of mentality aspect, characteristics. First and foremost, you need to be committed to what you do. Secondly, you need discipline and endurance to stick to it and to stick to your objectives. And the last one is, of course, the know-how, and that could be a mental know-how, but it could also be physical capability. All these things are very, very similar when you train in ice hockey, when you train for an Ironman, or when you're trying to achieve objectives for a company. Those are the things that I always try to keep in mind. You're mentioning a very important word, which is iconic importance. That iconic importance traces back predominantly to our most iconic race, which is the World Championship on Hawaii in Kona. It takes place every year, and I think every triathlete dreams about starting in Kona one time in his life. It's very similar or comparable with a tennis player who wants to play in Wimbledon, or a Formula One race driver who wants to start in Monte Carlo. So this is a very important asset, and I would say the most important asset of Ironman. But we have combined that with very strong other features. One is the operational excellence. In terms of operational reliability, our races are the benchmark in the industry. If you race as an athlete at an Ironman race, you know exactly what you get and what you pay for. Secondly, it is the globally centralized commercialization of our races. Very much data-based, very much direct communication-based, but also very much based also on innovations. And the last part, also related to innovations, is investments. The company has invested a lot in new races, in new aspects of the races, in new ways to support the athletes. That all has cost a lot of money, and Ironman has invested that money, and that is the reason why Ironman is having such a strong business position today as the series with the globally most athletes participating in our events. We know that it will grow further. Actually, I think it will even accelerate in growth. And that's simply driven by the fact that we see a strong correlation between average income level on one side and participation in our sports on the other side. Wherever we see a higher income level, we see a growing interest of people in practicing endurance sports. People look for challenges when the basic needs are covered. And one challenge is to do an endurance sport. This is the reason why we have more races right now in Germany or France or UK than we have races in Turkey. But as the average income level in Turkey or in China or in African countries is growing, we see more and more Ironman races as well. And that's the reason why the sport will grow further. Always start from the consumer, particularly from, in our case, from the athlete. What is important for him or for her? How can I address it? And how can I build an organization around it to address that need? That will then automatically create revenues and profit. So that's something that I always try to keep in mind and try to address it with perseverance, with discipline, and with know-how. It's in general. You always have to show enthusiasm about what you are doing. You have to bring it across. You have to be empathic, a leader. And secondly, combining that with know-how and with endurance. I would say it's Herbert Hainer, the CEO of Adidas. I know Herbert since quite some time now. When I started as a young assistant with Procter & Gamble, he was already a well-advanced, I think he was working in sales at that point of time, actually, even though I think he's a marketing person. But what he has done with Adidas is, in my point of view, really, really impressive. He made it a really well-structured, well-organized company with very, very impressive growth over the last years. And that did not only have a strong business impact on shareholders and employees, it also had a great impact on our sport with regard to innovation, developing new products, but also supporting sports. I think a lot of sports events and sports categories that we have, particularly here in Germany, would not exist or would not be in such a strong position without the support and help from Adidas. And that's the reason why I'm a big fan of the leadership of Herbert Hainer.